They laughed when I spoke about combat, like I was pretending to be one of them. They didn't know the truth I carried or the blood I washed off my hands in silence. That night, their laughter lit a fuse I'd been holding for years, and when it burned out, I wasn't the same daughter they remembered. The challenge coin in my pocket weighed heavier than any medal they'd ever seen, and soon, they'd understand why. My name is Claire Dalton, and I've been invisible in my own family for 32 years. The smoke from Dad's grill drifted across our backyard in Wilmington, mixing with the salt air from the coast 3 miles away. I watched him flip burgers with the same precision he'd once used to command his regiment-controlled efficient, expecting perfection. Mom arranged potato salad on the picnic table like she was setting up for inspection. Everything in the Dalton household ran on military time, military standards, military pride, except when it came to me. "Claire's back from her little assignment," Mom announced to Aunt Rebecca, who'd driven down from Raleigh with her new boyfriend, some contractor who kept talking about his boat. 3 years doing maintenance work on those drone things. Maintenance work. I took a long pull from my beer, letting the words settle in my chest like shrapnel. Luke sat at the head of the table, because of course he did. My older brother still carried himself like he was leading a SEAL team through hostile territory, even though he'd been out for 2 years. His wife, Jennifer, hung on his every word as he recounted, for probably the 100th time, the story of his bronze star. "The extraction was hot," he said, gesturing with his beer bottle. "Couldn't see shit through the sandstorm. Then out of nowhere, air support shows up. Saved our asses." I knew that sandstorm. I knew every grain of sand in it, because I'd been watching through thermal imaging from 30,000 feet up, my hands steady on the controls despite my heart hammering against my ribs. Reaper 3, they'd called me. The ghost in the sky. Claire wouldn't understand, Luke added, catching my eye across the table. "Different kind of service. You know, she fixes engines." The cousins laughed. Uncle Pete laughed. Even Dad cracked that tight smile he reserved for Luke's stories. "Actually," I said, setting down my beer, "I was deployed in combat operations. Forward operating base outside. Combat." Dad interrupted, his eyebrows raised. "Sweetheart, you fix engines. You don't fight wars." The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. Jennifer actually snorted into her wine glass. Mom shook her head with that patronizing smile, the one that said, "Poor Claire, trying to fit in with the boys." "I was in the combat zone," I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building in my throat. "Running live operations. Running diagnostics. Maybe." Luke cut in. "Come on, Claire, we all served, but let's not pretend we all served the same way. Some of us were actually in the shit. Some of us." The words echoed in my head, mixing with the phantom sounds that never quite left the alarm bells, the static-filled voices crying out coordinates, the steady thrum of the Predator's engine as I guided it through Syrian airspace at 2 a.m, hunting the insurgent cell that had pinned down a SEAL team. Luke's team, though he'd never know it. "Remember that time she called home crying because her computer crashed?" Mom said to Aunt Rebecca, both of them giggling like schoolgirls. "During her deployment. Can you imagine Luke's out there getting shot at, and Claire's upset about technical difficulties?" That computer crash had been a system failure during a critical operation. I'd spent 14 hours straight rebuilding the navigation system while insurgents closed in on a Marine convoy. My hands had been shaking so badly afterward that I couldn't hold a coffee cup, but all Mom heard when I called was weakness. "At least she served," Jennifer offered, trying to be kind in that condescending way. "Support roles are important too." Support role. I felt the laugh building in my chest, dark and bitter. I'd been the angel of death for 3 years, raining hellfire missiles on enemy positions with surgical precision. I'd provided overwatch for more operations than I could count, been the eye in the sky that kept American soldiers alive. But to them, I was just the daughter who played with computers while real warriors like Luke did the actual fighting. "You're right," I said finally. standing up from the table. Different kind of service. I walked toward the house, their laughter following me like shadows. Through the kitchen window, I could see them all, still talking, still laughing. Luke was probably launching into another war story, another tale of heroism that would make Dad's chest swell with pride. They didn't know about the nightmares that woke me at 3:15 every morning, always 3:15, the exact time I'd lost visual on that convoy before finding them again. They didn't know about the 7 confirmed kills credited to Reaper 3 in the classified files. They didn't know about the voice recordings locked in a Pentagon server somewhere, recordings of me guiding troops home through impossible odds. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A message from Mason Reed, a name I hadn't thought about in months. Saw you're back stateside. We need to talk. You deserve to know what really happened with your brother's medal. I stood in my childhood kitchen, listening to my family's laughter drift through the window, and made a promise to myself. The next time they laughed at me, I'd give them something real to choke on. Luke's shadow had covered me since we were kids, but it grew monstrous after his discharge. Every room in my parents' house had become a shrine to his service. The bronze star sat in a custom display case above the fireplace. His seal trident was framed in the hallway. Photos of him in full gear covered Dad's study walls like religious icons. Meanwhile, my Air Force commendation medals stayed boxed in the attic, along with everything else Mom deemed clutter. It was a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after that barbecue, when I heard them talking in the living room. I'd come by to grab some old gear from storage, but their voices stopped me in the hallway. Mrs. Patterson was so impressed when I told her about Luke's rescue mission, Mom was saying to someone on speakerphone, probably her book club friend. A real hero, not like Claire. Poor thing, she tries so hard to fit in with the military talk, but honestly, she just did computer work. Luke says she never even left the base. Computer work. My hands clenched around the box I was carrying. Well, someone has to do the boring jobs, the voice on the phone replied. That's sweet that she wanted to serve too. Following in Luke's footsteps. Following. Mom laughed. Oh no. Luke enlisted first. Claire just tagged along, I suppose. Harold says she thought the Air Force would be easier. Safer. You know how girls are. I set the box down silently, my jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Through the doorway, I could see Mom gesturing with her wine glass, completely absorbed in diminishing my service to entertain her friend. Luke's starting that training company next month. Mom continued, real combat training for law enforcement, based on his experience in the field. Claire offered to help with the, what did she call it? Tactical planning. But Luke politely declined. He needs people with actual combat experience. Actual combat experience. The phrase burned through me like white phosphorus. I thought about the night over Helmand Province when I'd kept watch for 11 hours straight, guiding 3 separate units through a Taliban ambush. My eyes had been bleeding from the strain by the end, but every soldier made it home. Luke appeared in the doorway of his old room, carrying a box of his own memorabilia. He saw me in the hallway and nodded. That condescending big brother nod that meant, hey there, little sister trying to play soldier. Claire, he said, loud enough for Mom to hear. Didn't know you were here. Mom's just talking about the business. If you want, I could use someone to handle the admin stuff. Scheduling, billing, that kind of thing. Admin stuff. I looked at him, really looked at him. The scar on his jaw that he claimed came from hand-to-hand combat, but I knew came from a bar fight in San Diego. The way he stood, still favoring his left leg from an old injury he'd turned into a war story. The carefully practiced squint that made him look battle-hardened in photos. That's generous, I said flatly. Family looks out for family, he replied, clapping me on the shoulder like I was one of his junior enlisted. I know you did your part over there, even if it wasn't. The real thing. The real thing. I wanted to tell him about the real thing, about the 6-hour operation where I'd provided overwatch for his unit, identifying and eliminating threats before they even knew danger was coming. About the night I'd guided his team through that sandstorm he loved to brag about. My voice, the only thing between them and walking straight into an ambush. But everything was classified, sealed behind red tape and security clearances that would put me in federal prison if I breathed a word of it. Besides, Luke continued, heading downstairs. Jennifer's pregnant, going to name him Harold if it's a boy, after Dad, carrying on the warrior tradition. You know, warrior tradition. I stayed in that hallway for a long moment, surrounded by photos of Luke in his dress blues, Luke with his team, Luke shaking hands with admirals. There were 2 photos of me in uniform, both tucked behind larger frames, barely visible. That night, I sat in my apartment, laptop open, staring at the encrypted files I wasn't supposed to have. Flight logs, mission reports, audio recordings. All with my call sign Reaper 3. All with one recurring objective: provide air support for SEAL Team 7. Luke's team. The classified after-action report for Operation Crimson Dune sat on my screen. The operation Luke got his Bronze Star for. The one where air support appeared through the sandstorm to save the team. Except the report told a different story. It named the drone operator who'd flown for 13 straight hours, coordinating with ground forces, identifying targets, and ultimately calling in the danger-close airstrike that cleared their extraction route. That operator was me. But when the medals were handed out, when the stories were told, when the heroes were crowned, my name had been removed, replaced with vague mentions of aerial assets and support elements. Luke became the hero who'd led his team through impossible odds. I became the girl who fixed computers. My phone buzzed. Another message from Mason Reed. Found something in the unit archives you need to see. Your brother knows. He's always known. I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. He's always known. Outside my window, Wilmington slept peacefully. Somewhere across town, Luke was probably polishing his Bronze Star, practicing his war stories for potential clients. Mom was probably posting another Facebook update about her hero son. Dad was probably in his study, reading military history, wondering why his daughter couldn't be more like his son. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled out an old hard drive from my desk drawer, the one with the full audio from Crimson Dune. My voice, clear as day, calling out coordinates. Luke's voice, panicked and desperate, begging for extraction. The exact timestamp when I'd made the call that saved 7 lives, including his. They wanted to talk about real combat experience. Fine. Let's talk about it. The Veterans Alliance Conference was held at the old Hilton near Camp Lejeune, 40 minutes from home. I hadn't planned on going. These things were usually just Luke's crowd slapping backs and comparing scars. But something pulled me there. Maybe the weight of Mason's messages. Maybe just the need to be around people who'd actually been there, even if they didn't know my story. The ballroom smelled like bad coffee and government-issued cologne. Groups of veterans clustered around tall tables, their voices mixing with the clink of beer bottles. I recognized a few faces from the base. Drone operators like me who kept to the edges of the room while the special ops guys held court in the center. I was nursing a whiskey at the bar when someone said my call sign, Reaper 3. The voice was gravelly, uncertain. I turned to find a man in his 30s, built like a brick wall but carrying himself with the careful movements of someone who'd been broken and rebuilt. His eyes brown, alert, scarred at the corners, studied me with an intensity that made my spine straighten. Nobody's called me that in 2 years, I said carefully. I know that voice. He stepped closer, and I could see the SEAL Trident tattoo on his forearm. Jesus Christ, I know that voice. You were on comms during Crimson Dune. My heartbeat kicked up, but I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Bullshit! He leaned against the bar, his voice dropping. I'm Mason Reed, Sergeant Mason Reed, SEAL Team 7. I was there that night. That sandstorm was so thick we couldn't see 5 feet. GPS was fucked. Comms were sketchy. We were walking blind into what we later found out was an ambush would have been slaughtered if we'd kept going. He paused, ordered a beer, took a long pull before continuing. Then this voice comes through the static, Female, calm as ice. SEAL Team 7, this is Reaper 3. I have you on thermal. Adjust heading 270. Hostiles at your 12 o'clock, 300 meters. The memory flooded back. The green glow of thermal imaging. 7 heat signatures moving through the storm toward 12 more. Dug in and waiting. My hands steady on the controls, despite knowing that Luke, my brother, was one of those 7 dots on my screen. You guided us for 3 hours, Mason continued. Every turn, every street, every fucking doorway. You saw what we couldn't. Called in that danger close when we got pinned. I listened to that recording 100 times during recovery. I'd know that voice anywhere. Recordings are classified, I said automatically. So is what I'm about to tell you. Mason glanced around, then leaned closer. Your brother's team. You saved your brother's team. The words hit like a physical blow. I gripped my glass tighter. After the debrief, I did some digging, Mason said. Wanted to thank the operator who saved our asses. Found out Reaper 3 was Air Force, stationed at Al Dhafra. Found out she was a captain named Dalton. He paused. Found out her brother was Lieutenant Luke Dalton, Team 7. Stop! My voice came out sharper than intended. He knows. Claire. Mason's eyes were deadly serious. Luke knows you were the one overhead that night. He heard your voice on the comms. We all did. He recognized you. The room seemed to tilt. I set down my glass before I dropped it. The after-action report. Mason continued. Originally named you specifically. Recommended you for a distinguished flying cross. But somewhere between draft and final, your name disappeared. Became aerial reconnaissance assets. Generic. Anonymous. Why? The word came out strangled. Ask your father. Mason's jaw tightened. Colonel Harold Dalton was consulted on the report, being that his son was involved. Next thing we know, the whole thing's been sanitized. Luke gets his Bronze Star for exceptional leadership under fire. You become a footnote. The rage that had been simmering for years threatened to boil over. Dad. Of course it was Dad. Couldn't have his daughter overshadowing his son. Couldn't have the girl who fixed computers being the real hero of the story. There's more, Mason said. The other guys from the team, we remember. We know what you did. Thompson wanted to reach out, but the brass made it clear we were to maintain operational security. But fuck that. You saved 7 lives that night. My life. Your brother knows it. Your father buried it. And you've been carrying it alone ever since. It doesn't matter, I said, though the words tasted like ash. It's classified. I can't say anything. Maybe not. Mason agreed. But we can. He pulled out his phone, showed me a group chat. 6 names, all from Team 7. The messages were about me, about Reaper 3, about how they wanted to make it right. We're tired of Luke playing hero with our story, Mason said. Tired of him building his business on a lie. That Bronze Star. He froze that night, completely froze. You talked him through every step, told him where to put his men, when to move, when to take cover. Without you, he would have led us straight into that ambush. I stared at the messages, each one a validation I'd never thought I'd receive. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. Mason said. This isn't about what we want. It's about what you deserve. There's going to be a ceremony next month. Local Veterans Appreciation event. Big crowd. Lots of media. Luke's supposed to be the keynote speaker, talking about leadership under fire. He finished his beer, set it down with deliberate precision. Would be a real shame if someone who was actually there decided to set the record straight. Mason pulled out a challenge coin, placed it on the bar between us. SEAL Team 7's insignia gleamed under the bar lights. You earned this 3 years ago, he said. Every one of us owes you our lives. It's time people knew the truth. He walked away, leaving me alone with the coin and the weight of possibility. Across the room, I could see other members of Team 7 watching me. They nodded, one by one, a silent acknowledgement of debt owed. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than rage. I felt vindicated. Summer arrived with its usual Carolina humidity, and with it, Luke's grand opening celebration for his tactical training company. The whole family gathered at the house again, this time with local press invited to cover the hometown hero's new venture. I stood in the kitchen, watching through the window as Luke held court on the back deck, surrounded by reporters and potential clients. His voice carried across the yard, that practiced storytelling tone he'd perfected over years of repetition. Leadership under fire isn't something you can teach in a classroom, he was saying. When you're in that sandstorm, can't see your hand in front of your face, and you know the enemy's out there, that's when training becomes instinct. My phone buzzed. Mason, you seeing this bullshit? Claire, stop hiding in there and come celebrate your brother's success. Mom called from the doorway, her voice syrupy sweet for the guests, but with that underlying steel that demanded compliance. I walked outside, the challenge coin heavy in my pocket. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, making everyone cluster under the deck umbrellas. I found a spot at the edge of the gathering, close enough to hear, but far enough to avoid attention. Tell them about the Bronze Star mission. Someone encouraged Luke. He launched into it with practiced ease, each pause calculated, each gesture rehearsed. I'd heard this version so many times I could mouth along with the words. The sandstorm, the confusion, the decisive leadership that saved his team. We were completely blind out there, Luke was saying. But I kept the team together, kept us moving. Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts. You know, your instincts. I said, loud enough that heads turned. Luke's eyes found me through the crowd. Claire, everyone, this is my sister. She served too, in the Air Force. Support role. That familiar dismissive tone. Support role. The crowd offered polite smiles before turning back to Luke, but I stepped forward. Actually, I was in combat operations, I said, my voice carrying. Drone operations. I was there during Crimson Dune. Luke's smile tightened. Claire. Funny thing about that sandstorm, I continued, moving closer to the center. You really couldn't see anything from the ground, but from 30,000 feet, with thermal imaging, you could see everything clear as day. The crowd had gone quiet. Dad stood up from his chair, his expression a warning. Claire, this isn't the time, he started. When is the time? Dad. I pulled out my phone. When is the time to talk about how Luke's team would have walked straight into an ambush if someone hadn't been watching from above? When is the time to mention that every movement, every turn, every order Luke gave that night came from someone else talking in his ear? You're out of line, Luke said, his face flushing red. Am I? I held up my phone. I have the audio logs. Luke, your voice, panicked, asking for help. My voice, calm, telling you exactly where to go. Jennifer grabbed Luke's arm. What is she talking about? She's confused, Luke said quickly. PTSD or something. Claire, you should go inside. Reaper 3, we're completely lost. Can't see shit. What do you have? I quoted from memory. That's you. Luke, 3 hours and 17 minutes into the operation. Would you like me to play the response? The reporters had their phones out now, recording. Dad moved toward me, but I stood my ground. Classified information. Claire, he said in his command voice. You took an oath. So did you, I shot back. An oath about honor and integrity. Where was that when you scrubbed my name from the report, when you made sure your son got the glory while your daughter got erased? You don't understand how things work. I understand perfectly. My voice was steady, cold. The daughter who fixed computers couldn't possibly be the one who saved the golden boy, couldn't have that story getting out at the country club. Mom stepped forward, her social smile desperately trying to salvage the situation. Everyone, please. Family squabbles. You know how it is. It's not a squabble. Mom. I looked directly at the cameras now recording. It's theft. Luke stole my story, my valor, my service. Built his whole reputation on a lie while I sat at family dinners being mocked for not understanding real combat. "You're destroying your brother," Dad growled. "No," I said. "I'm done being destroyed by him." I walked to the edge of the deck, where the ocean breeze cut through the suffocating tension. The waves crashed in the distance, a rhythm that reminded me of rotor blades, of long nights watching over soldiers who'd never know my name. My phone rang. "Mason, put it on speaker," his voice said when I answered. I did. "Luke Dalton is a coward and a fraud." Mason's voice rang out clear across the silent deck. "Claire Dalton saved our lives. Every man on Team 7 knows it. We've been ordered to keep quiet, but I'm done with that. She was our guardian angel that night, and Luke was nothing but a scared lieutenant following her orders." Luke lunged for my phone, but I pulled it away. "Anyone wants to know what really happened during Crimson Dune," Mason continued, "ask the 6 other guys who were there. We'll tell you who the real hero was." The call ended. The silence was deafening. Luke stood there, his carefully constructed image crumbling in front of the very people he'd tried to impress. The reporters were typing frantically on their phones. The potential clients exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Is it true?" Jennifer asked quietly, her hand on her pregnant belly. "Luke, is any of what she's saying true?" Luke couldn't meet her eyes, or mine, or anyone's. That night, I stood on the beach alone, letting the waves wash over my feet. The party had dissolved into chaos after my revelation. Reporters wanted statements. Dad had retreated to his study. Mom had locked herself in her bedroom. Luke had disappeared entirely. My phone lit up with messages from Team 7, each one the same. "Thank you for your service, Reaper 3. For the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. The truth was a funny thing. You could bury it, classify it, scrub it from reports. But it always found a way to surface, just like bodies in the water. Just like ghosts in the sky. The old storage unit smelled like dust and abandoned memories. I hadn't been here since my discharge, but I knew exactly what I was looking for. Past the boxes of uniforms, past the footlocker with my medals. There it was a small external hard drive wrapped in static-proof material, hidden inside a hollowed-out training manual. My insurance policy. I'd learned early in my service that documentation was everything. Every flight hour logged, every mission recorded, every communication saved. It wasn't technically legal to keep these files, but after watching too many operators get thrown under the bus when missions went sideways, I'd started making backups, just in case. The drive contained everything from Operation Crimson Dune, not just the official recordings, but the raw footage from my drone's cameras, the unedited audio, the timestamps that proved every word I'd said was true. Back in my apartment, I plugged in the drive and watched 3 years disappear. There I was, my voice younger but steady, calling out grid coordinates. There was Luke's team on thermal, 7 white dots moving through the green-tinted hell of an Iraqi sandstorm, and there, waiting in perfect ambush position, were 12 insurgents with RPGs and heavy machine guns. "SEAL Team 7, this is Reaper 3. Full stop. I repeat, full stop. You have 12 hostiles dug in, 300 meters to your north. They're waiting for you." Luke's voice, high with panic. "Reaper 3, we can't see anything. We're sitting ducks out here." "Copy that. I have you covered. On my mark. Move to the building at your 3 o'clock. I'll clear your path." The screen flared white as the first Hellfire missile struck, then the second. The insurgent position disappeared in a cloud of heat and debris. I watched myself guide Luke's team through the storm for the next 3 hours until the extraction helicopters arrived. But there was more. Files I'd almost forgotten about. An email thread between my father and Luke's commanding officer, dated 1 week after the mission. "Colonel Dalton, per our discussion, the after-action report has been amended. Your son's leadership will be appropriately highlighted, and the supporting elements will remain generalized. The medal recommendations have been adjusted accordingly." My father's response: "Appreciated. My daughter doesn't need that kind of attention." It would complicate things for everyone. Complicate things. I read it again, feeling the rage build fresh. He'd sold me out to protect Luke's image, to preserve the family narrative of the warrior son and the support role daughter. I pulled out another file, this one from 2 months after Crimson Dune. A performance review from my commanding officer, Captain Dalton, continues to exceed all expectations. Her actions during multiple operations, particularly Operation Crimson Dune, saved countless American lives. She is, without question, one of the finest drone operators this unit has ever seen. One of the finest, but at home, I was the girl who fixed computers. My phone rang. Mason. "You stirred up a hornet's nest," he said without preamble. "Luke's been calling everyone from the team, trying to get us to recant, threatening legal action if we talk to the media." "Let him try," I said, staring at the screen. "I have everything, every recording, every transmission, every classified document that proves what really happened." "You can't release classified material." "I don't have to." I pulled up another file, the original draft of the after-action report, before my father's intervention. The Pentagon has a whistleblower protection program for cases of stolen valor, especially when it involves senior officers manipulating official records. Mason was quiet for a moment. "You're really going to do this?" "They had their chance to make it right," I said. 3 years of chances. Every family dinner where they laughed at me. Every time Luke told his war story while I sat there silent. Every medal ceremony where my name was conveniently forgotten. "What about your security clearance, your career?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. What career I left to the service because I couldn't stand the lie anymore. Couldn't stand being invisible. I've been fixing civilian aircraft engines for 2 years while Luke built an empire on my achievements. "The team wants to help," Mason said. "Thompson's wife is a journalist. She's interested in the story, and Rodriguez still has connections at Pentagon. He says there's precedent for retroactive recognition in cases like this." I pulled up the crown jewel of my collection video footage from my drone during the exact moment I called in the danger close airstrike. You could see Luke's team pinned down, taking fire from 3 directions. You could see the insurgents closing in, and you could see the precise moment my hellfires turned the tide, so close to friendlies that it violated every safety protocol. I'd made that call knowing it could end my career if anyone got hurt. But all 7 made it home. "Mason," I said, "remember when Luke got back? That press conference he gave. Yeah, called himself the tip of the spear. I have the transcript. Want to know what he said about air support." I pulled it up, reading aloud. "We had some help from the air, sure. But at the end of the day, it was boots on the ground that made the difference. Technology can't replace warrior spirit. Warrior spirit." While I was washing caffeine pills down with Red Bull on hour 13 of the operation, keeping his team alive through sheer will and precise targeting, he was already crafting the narrative that would erase me. "Send me everything," Mason said suddenly. "Whatever you're comfortable sharing that won't get you arrested. The team is meeting tomorrow. We're going to make this right." "Why?" I asked. "Why now?" "Why do you care?" "Because I have daughters," Mason said simply. 2 of them. "And I don't want them growing up in a world where their achievements can be stolen just because their last name matches their brother's. You saved our lives. Claire, the least we can do is give you back your name." After he hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of missions past. On my laptop screen, that thermal footage played on loop 7 dots moving through a sandstorm, oblivious to the death waiting for them until a voice from above warned them away. My voice, Reaper 3. I pulled out a USB drive and started copying files. The non-classified ones, the ones that told enough of the story without landing me in federal prison. Personnel reviews, commendations with redacted portions. The original medal recommendation before it was downgraded. 3 years of silence was about to end. They wanted to laugh at the girl who fixed computers. Let them choke on the truth. The invitation to Mom's anniversary dinner arrived wrapped in layers of guilt and expectation. 35 years of marriage. A private dining room at the yacht club. Family only. Luke would be there, of course. The first time we'd all be in the same room since his business launch disaster 2 weeks ago. I arrived late, deliberately. Let them settle into their comfort before I disrupted it. The private dining room overlooked the marina, boats bobbing in the evening light. Luke sat at Dad's right hand, as always, though his usual swagger seemed diminished. Jennifer beside him, her pregnancy showing now, her eyes avoiding mine. Mom fluttered around making small talk with Aunt Rebecca. Dad sat rigid at the head of the table, his kernels bearing intact despite retirement. Claire decided to join us after all, Mom said, her tone suggesting I'd already failed some test. I took my assigned seat at the far end, naturally, and placed a small USB drive next to my plate. Luke's eyes tracked the movement. "What's that?" he asked, trying for casual. "Just some old memories," I said. Thought we might take a trip down memory lane. Dinner proceeded with forced normalcy. Mom talked about her garden. Dad discussed his golf handicap. Luke stayed unusually quiet until Jennifer finally broke. "Is anyone going to address what happened?" she asked. "The things that were said, Luke, you still haven't explained." "It's complicated." Luke cut her off. "Military operations aren't simple. Claire doesn't understand the full picture." "Then explain it," I said, pulling out my laptop. "Help me understand." "Claire, this is not appropriate," Dad commanded. Neither was stealing my accomplishments. I opened the laptop, angled it so everyone could see. "Want to see something interesting? This is from the DoD personnel database. Public record, nothing classified." I pulled up Luke's service record, then mine, side by side. Luke 11 confirmed enemy engagements. Me 47. Luke Bronze Star for Valor. Me Air Force Commendation Medal for Administrative Excellence. I laughed. Administrative Excellence. That's what they called it when I coordinated joint operations that saved 3 different units. "You sat in an air-conditioned trailer," Luke snapped. "You played video games while real soldiers." "While real soldiers what?" I interrupted, clicking play on an audio file. Luke's voice filled the room, raw and panicked. "We're taking heavy fire!" "Where the fuck is our support? We're going to die out here." Then my voice. "Steady. Wildcat 7, this is Reaper 3. Danger close authorized. Take cover behind the north wall. Impact in 30 seconds. The explosion sound made Jennifer flinch. "That's classified," Dad said, standing. "That specific recording is," I agreed, stopping the playback. "But the existence of it isn't. The fact that it happened isn't. And the 7 men whose lives I saved that night, they're not classified either." I pulled up my phone, showed them the group chat, messages from Mason, Thompson, Rodriguez, and the others, each one confirming what Luke had been denying. "They're lying," Luke said, but his voice lacked conviction. "All of them. Your entire team is lying." I pulled up a photo Mason had sent Team 7 at a bar last week, holding up a sign, "Thank you, Reaper 3. Jennifer stood abruptly. "I need air." "Sit down," Luke commanded, but she was already walking out. "You're destroying this family," Mom said, tears starting. "For what pride jealousy?" "For truth," I said. "For 3 years of being laughed at. For every time I was told I didn't understand real combat while Luke built his reputation on my work. You're upset about recognition." Dad's voice was ice. "Grow up. Claire. The mission success is what matters, not who gets credit." "Really?" I pulled up another file. "Then why did you personally intervene to ensure Luke got the Bronze Star? Why did you specifically request my name be removed from the after-action report?" Dad's face went pale. "How did you—" "I kept everything. Dad, every email, every memo, every communication that proves you actively buried my contributions to elevate Luke." I turned the laptop toward him. "This one's my favorite. You writing to General Patterson about how unfortunate it would be if a drone operator overshadowed the SEALs, how it might affect morale." "I was protecting the integrity of special operations," Dad said. "You were protecting your ego," I countered. Couldn't have your daughter showing up your son. Couldn't have the girl being the hero in your warrior family narrative. Luke slammed his hand on the table. You want to be the hero, fine. You were the eye in the sky, happy. But I was on the ground. I was the one in actual danger. You were the one who froze. Mason's voice interrupted from my phone. I'd called him, had him on speaker. Claire, am I on? You're on, I confirmed. Luke, this is Mason. Remember when you couldn't figure out which building to enter? When you nearly let us into that IED, Claire talked you through every step. She saved your life, and you took her glory. That's the truth. Luke stood, his chair scraping. This is bullshit. Ancient history. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me, I said quietly. It matters that I can't sleep without seeing those thermal images. It matters that I have nightmares about losing visual on your team. It matters that I carried this trauma in silence while you turned it into marketing material. The room was silent except for the distant sound of boat horns. I have one more thing, I said, pulling up a document. A letter from General Morrison, current Air Force Chief of Staff. He's reviewed my case. The Pentagon is opening an investigation into what they're calling systematic gender discrimination in combat recognition. They want to review all operations where female operators were denied appropriate acknowledgement. You went to the Pentagon. Dad's voice was barely a whisper. I went to everyone, I said. The Inspector General, the Senate Armed Services Committee, the press. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every woman whose service was minimized, whose valor was stolen, whose trauma was ignored because it didn't fit the narrative. Luke grabbed his jacket. I'm done with this. So am I said, closing the laptop. I've been done for 3 years. The difference is, now everyone else knows why. As Luke stormed out, Dad following, Mom crying into her napkin, I sat in that expensive dining room overlooking the peaceful marina and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The USB drive still sat by my plate, untouched. Inside was everything the full presentation I'd prepared, all the evidence, all the proof. But I didn't need it. The truth was already out there, spreading through military networks, media outlets, and Pentagon offices. The ghost in the sky finally had a name, and they'd never laugh at me again. The silence after the dinner lasted 3 days. Then Mason called. You need to see this, he said. Check your email. The attachment was a video file. Luke, standing in what looked like his office, addressing the camera. His tactical training company's logo visible in the background. I hit play. I want to address recent allegations about my service record, Luke began, his jaw tight. Some former team members have made claims about Operation Crimson Dune that are mischaracterized. While air support was helpful during that mission, the facts remain. I closed it. More lies. More deflection. But Mason had sent something else. A second video, time-stamped an hour after Luke's statement. This one showed 7 men in a bar, all wearing SEAL Team 7 shirts. Thompson spoke first. We're here to set the record straight about Crimson Dune. Then Rodriguez. Luke Dalton was our lieutenant, but Claire Dalton was our guardian angel. Each man spoke in turn, detailing what really happened that night. How they'd been lost, terrified, walking into certain death until my voice guided them home. How Luke had frozen when the shooting started, unable to make decisions until I talked him through each move. How the bronze star on his wall belonged to someone else. Mason went last. We kept quiet because we were ordered to, because we thought loyalty meant protecting our lieutenant, but real loyalty means honoring the person who actually saved our lives. That was Captain Claire Dalton, call sign Reaper 3. The video had already gone viral. 20,000 views in 3 hours. My phone rang. Dad. You've destroyed him, he said without preamble. Your brother's business is finished. Clients are pulling out. The media is calling him a fraud. He is a fraud. He's your family. So am I said. Where was this concern when you buried my service record? When you let me sit at that table being mocked for not understanding real combat, I was protecting yourself. I finished. Your image. Your perfect military family with the hero's son. Well, congratulations. Dad, you got exactly what you built, a house of lies. And now it's falling down. I hung up and drove to the Veterans Memorial Park. The ceremony was in 2 hours. Luke was supposed to give the keynote about leadership under fire. I wondered if he'd show. The crowd was bigger than expected. Local news vans lined the street. Veterans in dress uniforms filled the chairs. And there, in the front row, sat all 7 members of SEAL Team 7 who'd been at Crimson Dune. Luke's name was still on the program, but when the time came for his speech, the organizer took the microphone looking flustered. "We've had a slight change to our program. Lieutenant Dalton has withdrawn from today's ceremony." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Then Mason stood up. "I'd like to say something," he announced, walking to the podium uninvited. The organizer, recognizing the SEAL insignia, stepped aside. "3 years ago, my team was saved by someone we couldn't see, couldn't thank, and weren't allowed to acknowledge," Mason began. "Today, we're here to correct that." One by one, his teammates joined him on stage. Thompson carried a wooden box. Rodriguez held a folded flag. The others formed a line. "Captain Claire Dalton," Mason called out, his eyes finding me in the crowd. "Would you join us?" Every head turned. I sat frozen for a moment, then stood on legs that felt disconnected from my body. The walk to the stage felt like miles. "We can't give you the medals you deserve," Mason said when I reached them. "That's above our pay grade, but we can give you what should have been yours from the beginning." Thompson opened the box. Inside was a SEAL Team 7 challenge coin, but not a standard one. This was custom-made, with an image of a Predator drone on one side and their team insignia on the other. Around the edge, Reaper 3 Guardian Angel Crimson Dune. "Every member of the team has one," Rodriguez explained. "You're not a SEAL, but you're part of our history, our survival." "This is—" I couldn't finish, my throat tight. "Overdue," Mason finished. 3 years overdue. Then, in unison, all 7 men saluted, not the casual salute of veterans at a ceremony, but the rigid, formal salute of active duty military to a superior officer. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding. Through the tears, I was fighting. I saw Luke at the edge of the park, standing by his truck. Our eyes met across the distance. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something that might have been recognition, or regret, or maybe just defeat. He turned and left. An older veteran approached the stage, his chest covered in ribbons from Vietnam. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gravelly with age. "I flew Hueys in '68, different aircraft, same job keeping our boys alive from above. Thank you for your service." One by one, others approached. Drone operators who'd been in the shadows, female veterans who'd had their service minimized, pilots who knew what it meant to be the guardian angel nobody thanked. "You should say something," Mason whispered. I looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at the uniforms and faces waiting. "I'm not a hero," I began, my voice carrying across the park. "Heroes are the ones on the ground, in the dirt, facing the enemy directly. I was just a voice in the sky, trying to bring them home. But I was there," I continued, stronger now. "I served, I fought, and for 3 years, I've carried the weight of that service in silence while others claimed my story. Today, that silence ends." I held up the challenge coin. "This means more than any medal, because it comes from the men who were there, who know the truth, who remember." The applause was thunderous, but better than the applause was the text that came through as I left the stage. From Jennifer, Luke's wife. "I'm leaving him. My child deserves better than a father built on lies. Thank you for having the courage I didn't." I stood in that park, surrounded by veterans who understood, holding a coin that weighed nothing but meant everything, and felt the last 3 years of anger finally start to release. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was 7 men standing on a stage, saying thank you. Sometimes that was enough. The morning sun cast long shadows across Wilmington National Cemetery. 6 months had passed since the ceremony, since the truth finally came to light. The media storm had died down, the Pentagon investigation was ongoing, and Luke's business had quietly folded. I stood before a grave I visited every week now, not family, but a fellow drone operator who'd taken his own life 2 years ago, unable to live with what he'd seen through the cameras. His family never knew what he'd really done overseas, just like mine hadn't known. "Hey, Mitchell," I said quietly. "They know now. All of them know." Behind me, footsteps on gravel. I turned to find Dad standing there, looking older than his 68 years. We hadn't spoken since the anniversary dinner. "Mason Reed told me I'd find you here," he said. I turned back to Mitchell's headstone. "What do you want?" "Dad." "To apologize." The words came out strained, foreign to his colonel's vocabulary. "And to give you this." He held out an envelope. Inside was a letter from the Secretary of the Air Force. My eyes scanned the formal language until I reached the key paragraph. Retroactive award of the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight during Operation Crimson Dune. "The Pentagon Review Board made their decision last week," Dad said. "Luke's Bronze Star has been revoked. The record's been corrected." I folded the letter carefully. "And you think this fixes everything?" "No," he said simply. "Nothing can fix what I did. I chose my son's reputation over my daughter's truth. I chose the story I wanted over the reality of what happened. I failed you as a father and as an officer." The words hung between us like the morning mist. "Mom," I asked. "She's adjusting. Luke moved to Colorado. Jennifer stayed here with the baby." He paused. "She named him Mitchell, after your friend here, once she learned his story." That broke something in me. Tears I'd been holding for months finally fell. "I've been relieved of my position on the Military Advisory Board," Dad continued. "Conflict of interest, conduct unbecoming, my reputation, the one I protected so fiercely, is gone." "Good," I said, and meant it. He nodded, accepting the judgment. "There's something else. The Air Force wants you to return. Full reinstatement, promotion to major, choice of assignment. The drone program needs people like you, people who understand the weight of it." I thought about Mitchell, about the others who'd cracked under the pressure of being death from above. About the nights I still woke up at 3:15 reliving every mission. "No," I said. "That part of my life is over." "Then what will you do?" I pulled out my phone, showed him the website Mason and the team had helped me build. "Aerial Operations Consulting. I'm training the next generation of drone operators, teaching them not just how to fly, but how to carry the weight, how to survive being the ghost in the sky." Dad studied the screen. "The team from Crimson Dune. They're all investors. Every one of them. Mason says it's the least they could do." I pocketed the phone. "Turns out there's a market for truth in this business." We stood in silence for a moment. Then Dad did something I'd never seen him do in 32 years. He saluted me, not as a colonel to a captain, but as one soldier to another. "Your mother would like to see you," he said as he lowered his hand. "When you're ready. If you're ever ready." "Maybe," I said. "Someday." He walked away, leaving me alone with Mitchell in the morning sun. I placed the challenge coin from Team 7 on Mitchell's headstone, where it caught the light like a small beacon. My phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer, with a photo of baby Mitchell. His aunt should meet him, she'd written. Behind that, messages from my new clients, a female Apache pilot struggling with command dismissing her combat experience, a drone crew chief whose PTSD wasn't recognized because he never left the base, others who'd been ghosts, shadows, invisible warriors in an invisible war. I looked one last time at Mitchell's grave, then walked toward the parking lot. There was work to do, stories to validate, Truths to tell. 3 nights ago, I'd slept through 3:15 a.m. for the first time since Crimson Dune. No nightmares, no phantom radio calls, just sleep. The revenge I'd sought wasn't just about exposing Luke or correcting the record. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my service, my truth. It was about ensuring no one else would sit silent at a family table while their valor was mocked and their trauma dismissed. At the cemetery gate, I met Mason. He'd been waiting, standing by his truck with a coffee in each hand. "Thought you could use this," he said, handing me a cup. "Any regrets?" I asked. "About going public." "Only one," he said. "That it took 3 years." We stood there, two warriors who'd fought different battles in the same war, watching the sun climb higher over the headstones. "You know, Luke called me," Mason said. "Wanted me to testify that he'd shown leadership under pressure." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That the only voice showing leadership that night had wings." I smiled. The first real smile in months. "Copy that. Wildcat 7. Roger, Reaper 3. Guardian Angel confirmed." As I drove away, the challenge coin on my keychain caught the light, sending reflections across the dashboard like stars, like thermal signatures in a sandstorm, like 7 lives saved by a ghost in the sky who finally had a name. Justice had come late, but it had come. And that voice they'd laughed at, it was the last one standing. Thank you for listening to this story of hidden valor and ultimate vindication. I'm curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the miles. If this story of Claire's journey resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in her position? Your perspectives make these stories come alive.